Hi, my name is Brenda Titus. I'm a professional hypnotist in Orange County, California. For information about my program, including in-person sessions, please go to my website, ochypnotherapy.com. As we begin today's Thoughts from the Hypnosis Office, I want to share that I'm going to be doing a whole series for the next several weeks on fear. And the reason is because it's October, at least the time that I'm initially recording and airing these episodes. Now, of course, I want you to be able to watch these episodes anytime throughout the year if you're interested in learning more about some of the things that I do around fear. So it will be, several episodes over the next several weeks. I'm really excited about that. And so October, I felt like is a good time. We're talking about all the spooky things, the scary things. And it really is a great time to be talking about fear. So, especially because people commonly think about getting hypnosis for fear. Now, the tricky thing is that a lot of times people come to me because they say that they have a phobia. Now, technically, a phobia is a clinical term. So usually when we think about, if it's diagnosed through a psychiatrist or a psychologist, we're talking about an irrational, extreme type of fear. Oftentimes, though, when I ask somebody, they will say, well, yes, it is irrational and it is an extreme response. However, they haven't necessarily been diagnosed by a psychiatrist or psychologist. So I do think it's important to acknowledge the difference. And so, I'm always really interested in exploring the concept of fear, and especially where we can be really aware of what the goal is. So the first part of the goal, when we're talking about rational versus irrational, would be to recognize that there are a lot of things that people come to me for where it is a rational fear or a legitimate fear, right? Something that is some sort of legitimate danger. And so our goal would be, with a legitimate danger, to have a legitimate response, not a over response. Or especially, I think that one of the challenges with when we get to phobia is that it is so extreme that people's lives are dramatically altered by that fear, dramatically limited by that fear as well. So of course, our goal to have a healthy relationship with fear and acknowledge that, there is a level of danger, but also to be able to go into a situation without being so overprotective, so overly cautious, so overly fearful that we, don't engage, especially where it becomes very life limiting. So the second part that I wanted to share is that people come to me all of the time with things that are very, legitimate dangers, but they have some sort of extreme or overreactive response. And so, and you name it. We're actually going to be talking about a few over the time that we work together, or actually that as I do my videos. So, fear of driving, fear of crowds, flying, those are very common things that people will come to me for. Fear of spiders or other insects or bugs. Sadly, sometimes people, have a fear of falling, and or a fear, a social anxiety, fear, a discomfort around being with other people. So, you name it. I will leave it to your imagination on the kinds of things that we can think that we can be afraid of, right? So, first thing that I always want to do is really help people understand the truth about the thing that they are fearing, and so that they can have a healthier relationship with it, and especially so that they can not be so frustrated with themselves about their fear, and not be beating themselves up about it. Acknowledge the legitimate danger associated with it, and then clear up the overreactive response. So with hypnosis, what we do is we really get into the weeds around where that fear came from. What is the cause or causes, and remove the irrational response. So this week, I thought it would be good to talk about what is a very common element of our fears, which is rooted in what we call in the hypnosis office the misperception of the child. An experience where our child brain, something that we experienced when we were young, that we just don't have the language, the understanding, the ability to process, and so it develops into a fear. So that when we have a similar experience again, we say, oh gosh, I don't want to experience what I experienced before. And so then we start avoiding, or unfortunately a fear starts with one thing and then it extrapolates and builds on itself and becomes bigger, more, and globalizes. So as we talk about a misperception of the child, so the first thing is that a lot of times, we really get down to some of these root causes. Sometimes they are very innocuous roots of the issue. So a few examples that I wanted to give today. So sometimes we might have gone through something that we just didn't understand when we were young. You have to put your brain into what you experienced when you were young, how you processed, how you even talked to other people about your experiences in life. So the reality is a lot of my clients maybe were a little bit more solitary or didn't talk to their parents about their feelings or different things like that. And so maybe they had a misunderstanding and they didn't express it to the parents to be able, or somebody who in authority who could explain, oh, this that's not really what happened. So one example that I wanted to use on the just didn't understand what was happening is I know somebody who, when they were a child, they went on the Mr. Toad's Wild Ride at Disneyland. And of course, in the ride, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, the car is being led through these different scenes, and a child may be put in the driver's seat, but of course the child is not actually driving the car, but it is a very immersive experience, and so the child experiences it from the first person. They experience it all as if it was happening. Well, spoiler alert, at the end of that ride, they drive straight into hell. It's warm, it's loud, and in the mind of a 4-year-old or some such, that is terrifying. And we can look as adults and say, well, of course that's not, it's not actually what happens, but it's what the child experiences, the child's mind. And so I thought that would be an interesting way to introduce this idea of the misperception of the child. So some of your fears might be literally rooted in an experience that you had that you just didn't understand, and especially was something that is very immersive and an experience like that. So the next one that I wanted to share is that sometimes a fear might develop because of a dream or an experience where the child was alone or in the dark. And this one, actually, some of these examples are my own examples, I admit it. So I actually had several pretty big fears as a child that were really associated with dreams that I had. I would have actually a few dreams where something really scary happened in my dream, but it was also tied to a song, like a song was playing in the background while I was having this dream. And so then I would hear the song in my waking life, and it was like replaying that terrifying dream. Now, I'll be very clear, the dream that I'm thinking of, I was only maybe 4 or 5 years old. It's amazing to me that my mind could even come up with a dream so scary, because, people dying in terrible, tragic ways. But my brain really hung on to that. So I would hear the song, and it would completely terrify me. And I didn't understand for many years. Just hearing the song, I would go into this terror. But then actually at some point when I was older, I was able to piece those parts together, and now I can hear the song and also be able to share, even tell people about this weird dream. Now, the other part, sometimes it's not even a dream, but something that we might experience alone in the dark and not really understand. So I'm going to give you the next example that comes from myself again, but also my husband has a very similar experience. And when I share it with you, you might have a similar experience as well. And that is being a child and having a humidifier in the room. Now, my husband says it's like Darth Vader was in the corner of my room. Now, mine is just a generic monster, generic monster making noise in the corner of the room, or Darth Vader. But as a child who doesn't understand what these noises are and why it's making that noise, it can be very disturbing. And so sometimes, like I said, can happen from a dream, can happen a child alone and just doesn't understand what is happening. Now, the next interesting element around misperceptions of the child and fear is when we see mom or dad, and we're young, especially young, mom or dad scared or weak. Now, I realize that I could give a lot of examples, and so I'll just let my pause be a pause there as you maybe even think about what that might mean in your own life. But the common example that we give is in the hypnosis world is seeing a spider. So mom sees a spider. This is not my example. This is truly comes from the hypnosis world commonly that we're trained on. Mom sees a spider, screams, and so then the child says, "Oh my gosh, spiders are so scary that mom is scared. That must be a terrible thing to have happen in my life." And so then a fear of spiders develops. And that is actually a very, very common thing that happens is we see mom scared, we experience her fear, and we internalize her fear, and then it becomes our own. And that is a very common root of fear. Now, I wanted to add that part around, if we see mom or dad scared or weak. I thought I'd kind of add the weak part in there because, if we see like a moment where, they're supposed to be strong, they're our protectors, they're the ones who are going to take care of us. And as a child, if we see that person be scared or weak, it kind of creates in our own minds this idea of, oh my gosh, am I safe? Who's going to protect me if something happens to them? And so that can kind of create a lot of internalized fear that can result, later down the road as being a more global kind of a fear. So let's see, what is my next one? Oh, okay. And I had one more example that I wanted to use. And this is kind of similar to the misperceptions, like I said, with the Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. But the other one is kind of like a child who just doesn't fully understand the world and how to piece it all together, especially symbolism and metaphor or stories. So if a child is exposed to something that's outside of their understanding, they try to understand it and make sense out of it from their own, limited young capacity. And so sometimes that can create a lot of fear. And again, a fear that isn't really rational, doesn't really make sense until, sometimes actually, quite frankly, some of these we grow out of. So my example that I wanted to use is kind of tricky because when I was young, my dad was really interested in computers and technology and all of that. And so one day he was dropping me off and he said, "Hey, listen to this song. This song is sung by a computer." Now, in the early 80s, that is a terrifying idea as a child. I mean, I was maybe 10. What do you mean an inanimate object is singing the song? That was broke my brain. I was very, very much scared me a lot. And unfortunately, it made me afraid of computers for a long time. I mean, I admit, I was like, these things are weird. I don't trust it. You know, they can sing songs, they can think on their own, and all of that. I mean, we did have a very early version of a personal computer, and she had a name, and she, you know, Gretchen, she was housed in my bedroom at my dad's house. So, I mean, I had like these different ideas that kind of added to the fear. And then, of course, you add, you know, some sci-fi along the way, and, you know, and now here's what's interesting. Now I learned, of course, and now I can hear those songs. I just actually heard one in the last few days, and I kind of go like, aw, how cute that we thought, you know, a computer played this song. Now when we think about, now this is where we get to the healthy relationship with fear, because look at all the things that our computers and artificial intelligence can do for us, which is great, but also can be kind of scary for people. I mean, especially, well, there's a lot of things that can make people nervous about you know, artificial intelligence and computers and different things like that. But it's kind of this funny, interesting story that I like to share. So I wanted to give those few examples, and this might kind of help you mull over some ideas around, oh, I hadn't thought about my fears in that way. And so, poof, you might actually feel better already from some fear that you had. And actually, I'm going to give some other examples. I kind of plotted out the month how I want to talk about some different elements of fear as we move through the month. So I'm really excited about that. But especially where it comes to this kind of like misperception of the child fear, people come to me and we get down to the root or roots of this fear, and we want to separate fact from fiction, right? Understand, you know, what is the necessary part of the fear? What is the beneficial part of the fear, and the unnecessary part, then, like I said, we can dissolve away, because once we realize, oh, that's why I had that, and that's not actually how the world works. So then we can, you know, not be afraid of the humidifier or our dreams, and then how that globalizes into other things in our day-to-day life. And now, the other part, of course, is learn how to have a healthy response to the actual legitimate scary things that are going on in our lives, which I'll give you a preview. My next video, I think I'm going to do what we call these Sunday scaries. You know, the real things that are looming over us in our lives that we need to have a healthy perspective on. So with that, I really hope that this episode of Thoughts from the Hypnosis Office was helpful for you, helped you think about some things associated with fear, and especially I hope that maybe it helps you just kind of jog loose some things so that you can be less fearful in some aspect of your life as well. Or maybe you can pass that along to somebody that you love, and it will help them. And so with that, I wish you a wonderful, brave, fearless week.